Okay, you're about to listen to this conversation with Rajan Shankara. He was a monk with Jai Kith, if you want to go back and listen to episode 3. And he was a monk there for 12 years. But his background is kind of something like this. At 18 years old, he found himself in Chicago as a very driven drug dealer. At age 18, he had a second chance when the police pulled him over with drugs in the back and kind of just let him go scot-free. He vowed to never break the law again, and he started an asphalt business, which was way too much money, way too soon. He then became a monk at 20 years old, and that he was there for 12 years. He eventually, though, decided that life in the world was to be lived, not feared and run away from. So he left and he became a husband and the father of a 2.5-year-old, and he worked at NASA and he worked as a therapist, and now he's working in finance and wealth planning. He's a philosopher at heart, and I'd say this conversation is a gift to be enjoyed. I hope you enjoy listening to it. I hope you get a lot of value out of it. There's a lot in this conversation, and it can be a very heavy topic as well. But we're going to be talking about meditation, mindfulness, reason, purpose for life, and why you might even want to pursue some form of a spiritual path, regardless of your faith. If you join me, thanks for joining. Enjoy.
Love can be so many different things, and Socrates said that there's love of self, love of things, love of other people, but to have love of soul is probably the most fulfilling type of experience and desire to have. You could tell someone the answer to a specific problem they may have, and that doesn't mean they're going to listen. It doesn't mean that answer is actually going to help them at this particular time in life. So you don't want to waste your time. And I think that's one of the greatest things that I've ever learned, which is called energy management. Energy management means you'll have a lot more energy to use for what you really want in life. Now, the distinction between this as an educator and a teacher is when someone comes to you. If someone came to me and said, I just need some support here, then I will extend every ounce of energy I have. So there's a difference there. And that's where energy management is crucial, because it requires reciprocation. If you don't have reciprocation of energy, your energy is flowing out.
That's the more tangible interpretation. Be there for people through your actions, as opposed to being there by changing their actions.
It's endless, the amount of things we wish we could have done, and it will never end. We'll always wish that. It's just ridiculous to think that the past should have been different. I mean, the past was perfect. It happened exactly how it should have. And the beautiful thing is
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer and interrogator of this podcast, and director and advisor and meditation teacher of Purpose Advisory. This purpose-driven project is entirely funded by Purpose Advisory, which I am a director of. We guide clients to make great life and money decisions, and we do this through a range of different services: life vision experiences, personality, investment strategies, cash flow systems, and through teaching meditation. If you want to learn any more about any of these, link in the comments below. Now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share it with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. How do you define success?
So I'm an old man, and after all these years of trying to find success and build success and live success, I realized that success is just doing what you love. That's it. Everything else is just details. But if you do what you love, you're a success.
Tell me more about that. How do you define what you love?
Or doing. So I think if you live, because there's several parts of that definition. To do what you love. So to do is a concept in and of itself, and by that I mean to live, to exist. And what you love is just that what makes you happy, what kind of silences out all the confusion and makes you at peace. And I think a janitor could be happy. I think a CEO could be happy and successful. I think someone without kids could be successful. Someone with kids could be successful. If the thing that you're doing that orients you in the world and inside your own consciousness makes you content, then you are the definition of successful.
Okay, and this content, so like you said, there's the to do and there's the what you love. And
Yeah.
so in this instance, like when you were talking about being happy or silencing out the confusion, is it just literally silencing out the confusion makes you happy, or is there something else that you need to do in order to experience more of the what you love?
No, it's different people. If one person can silence out confusion, then anything that they do could be something of love and something of appreciation. And that's the definition of a philosopher. A philosopher is someone who loves wisdom. So, and basically that turns into whatever they experience. So a philosopher is that type of person that doesn't need to do anything to have a specific kind of success or happiness. Whatever they're doing, that's also the definition of a mystic. Whatever they're doing is a part of their path. The other type of person needs an aim, they need a vision, a goal, something to do, something to strive towards to reach their success. It's usually a material thing, or it has a concept behind it. I'm going to be the owner of my own company and then I'll be successful, or that company will have to reach a $1 million market cap, then I'll be successful, whatever. That's the other kind of person. They need something tangible, so they're not a philosopher type of person.
Are you alluding to this idea that it's better to be one than the other, or it's more desirable to be
Oh
one rather
no,
than the
no,
other?
no, 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 no. I don't believe that anything would be better than anything else, because I believe in um, I believe in karma. I believe in everyone's path. I don't think that someone locked away in jail is doing something anything better than someone living out free in the world. Each is a part of their own evolution. It's necessary. So whatever you're doing is fine in the mind of a Hindu mystic.
Okay, there's a lot to dive into,
Yeah.
especially as both of us being dads, right? And this is something which I think we'll dive into more later. But this notion of accepting anything that others do when you're trying to cultivate the best for your children. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and if I forget, you can remind me to ask you
All right.
that
I'll
question
I'll
later
put
on.
it right here.
Yeah, perfect. You leave it right
There.
there. And what you were sharing about this idea of to do and what you love reminded me of the notion of have do be versus be do have. Right? Most people in our society will tend to think that they've got to have something in order to do something in order to be what they ultimately wanted in the end,
Yes.
as opposed to flipping it on its head. You be who you're meant to be to do what's most important, and then you have whatever you have. But it doesn't even matter. Like it's just
As a
right, whatever you end
consequence,
up having.
almost. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you? Where have you found it? So you've obviously had some interesting experiences with different people, right? Before you were a monk, when you were a monk for 12 years, you had a whole bunch of people around you who are living a very different lifestyle to the types of people who are your colleagues and or previous colleagues as well around you now. And so you've seen people, I'd imagine, at both extremes of that spectrum of the have do be do have, right?
Yeah.
And how do you see that playing out for people?
Well, it that's a good question. It it brings some people to sorrow, and it brings other people joy. It brings them to experience, and at the end of someone's road, they either are happy or they're miserable. And the idea with yoga is to not seek what eventually leads to sorrow, but to seek permanent contentment. And what I see in the world and people I work with and throughout my life and myself when I was younger, it's sorrow for the most part. They hit a wall, and I think my guru would say that that's sort of an intellectual wall, and the intellect is brilliant for going around itself and eventually meets itself where it started, and that's what the mind is good for. So that's where people end up. They go to school for one thing, they graduate and get what they wanted, and then they're no longer happy. Or they get into a relationship, they got what they wanted, and then, maybe 10 years later, they're no longer happy. Or they get the job they thought they wanted, now they're miserable because they got the money, but they don't know what anything means on a deeper level. So I think it's true that religious or spiritual people end up winning in the end, so to speak, when it comes to happiness.
Okay, so you've referred to happiness, you've referred to silencing out the confusion, you've referred to love, and you've referred to contentment, and you've almost like kind of bundled them all into one thing,
Hmm.
and then compared them to sorrow or misery and pain on the other side.
Sure.
Is that an apt description, like apt summary of kind of like this dichotomy that you're referring to?
Well, why not? I mean, if you're asking me what everything leads to, in my opinion, I think it is love. I think love is kind of the answer. And uh, love can be so many different things, but and Socrates said that you know, there's love of self, love of things, love of other people, um, but to have love of soul, I think is probably the most fulfilling type of experience and desire to have. But they're all built out of a yearning to have and to understand something. And if it takes more than one life to kind of understand the deepest complexities of reality, then that's fine. And see, all of these things are rounded out with reincarnation. So if you understand reincarnation and decide to believe in that, um, then it kind of helps you answer a lot of these questions about life, because it's not just this one life, uh, according to the Hindu scriptures. It's not just
So
this one thing.
how do we define life? Oh, sorry, I'll give context to that question because I've heard quite a few different interpretations in this regard. Like obviously, the one version of life that you can talk about is from when your heart starts beating to when your heart stops beating. That's a life. And I've heard in the complete other extreme that your life is between each breath. With every breath in, with every breath out, you're living and dying with each one, with every perhaps with every task that you take, right? Like the you were referring to a relationship or going to school and getting educated or whatever, right? That's a life, almost like a phase of your physical life, but it's a life.
Mm.
And similarly, people say that your life isn't based on your heart; it's based on how long your words impact others, right? So
Hmm.
the you could say that in that sense that Jesus and Buddha are still alive, and you could also say that your grandmother's still alive until your grandkids stop talking about her, right?
Mm, mm.
Like that type of thing. I mean, what how are you defining life in this context of reincarnation? Is it just one of those, or is it across all of those?
I think I've only been trained to consider it in terms of consciousness.
Okay.
Uh, from when you're spawned as a
Mm-hmm.
soul, uh, out of like this spark of divinity, to Vishvagrasa, the the Hindu concept of completely merging with that which created you and that which creates all things. I think that's how I probably comfortably sit inside my own perspective of life. And everything else that you said was good too, and I don't know who would have a problem with it. I think it's all fine.
But when you're referring to kind of getting the most out of life, right? You're referring to love of soul is the most fulfilling thing, and almost as if that kind of falls into what your purpose of life is, to find love for your soul, and those are the people who get the most out of life. And sometimes it takes multiple lives, but when you're referring to that, like if someone, let's just say that someone listening to this has a lot of resistance to this idea that you can have multiple lives, like once your heart stops beating, once you can't measure your consciousness anymore as into brainwave activity or whatever. I don't know,
Sure,
maybe
sure.
your consciousness is in your left knee for all I know, or for all we know, right? But let's just say that someone listening to this is like, well, I love what you're sharing about sorrow versus contentment and being the way that you want to be, and how love is the answer, and love of soul. I love this, but I'm not open to this idea that that you have multiple lives or anything beyond this. I got to make the most of this one that I have right now. And let's just say someone listening to this conversation has that view. How can you relate what you've learned as the truth of your life within that context?
That's a very good question. That's a great scenario because that's everyone. Like that's a lot of the people that I talk to are right there, and some of my best friends are there.
Mm,
And we've gone over this before, and it's different from being in the monastery, because being in the monastery, it's all like-minded people, and
mhm,
that could be a double-edged sword, because you can't reach out outside of those boundaries of thought. So it's a beautiful thing to come across someone who questions everything, and they're not there yet with that perspective. And honestly, I wasn't there with that perspective for the first 20 years of my life, maybe 18 years of my life or something like that. And I don't have anything to say to that person. I mean, you are welcome to live in any kind of subjective reality you'd like. Who am I to tell the crazy guy outside, crazy to me, that whoever he's yelling at, is not there? Maybe for him, his subjective experience, that other thing that he's yelling at is there, so he can live that perspective if he wants. Someone
mm,
who doesn't understand what reincarnation or karma is, or divinity in all things, or love, um, that's fine too. I mean, if they're happy and what they're doing works for them, then why would I want to change that? I couldn't even influence that if I wanted to. But if they're not happy, if there's a sort of hole in their life, and they can't seem to fill it, and they try and try all these different things, and there's just something not right, maybe maybe that person is ready for some sort of evolution or something. But it has to happen on your own. I mean, so I think once you find your happiness, you shouldn't go around trying to change other people's happiness.
Powerful message, right? Especially when we're in this society where almost everything that people do, especially if you look at social media, is ultimately to project a version of themselves towards others so that others will
Yes.
see them in a particular way. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, that also means that if I project myself the way that I am and other people don't act the same way, then obviously they don't believe me, and then I don't feel like I belong. Is,
Right.
I suspect, a big cause of frustration. But
Yeah.
but I guess you're just saying, just do the work inside and just focus on what's making you happy rather than wanting other people to have to agree with you.
Oh,
Or,
even if you know the answer to everything, to something, it doesn't matter. You could tell someone the answer to a specific problem they may have, and that doesn't mean they're going to listen. It doesn't mean that answer is actually going to help them at this particular time in life. So you don't want to waste your time. And I think that's one of the greatest things that I've ever learned, which is called energy management. Energy management means to have some responsibility about yourself and how you carry on in life, and not worry about what everyone else is doing. I mean, this goes to worrying about family problems and sibling issues, to driving on the road and worrying about what other drivers are doing, and getting upset or judging or getting aggressive with other people who aren't even having a conversation with you, and you'll never likely see them again. And that's how people drain themselves, and it's unconscious. They don't even know it. They don't even realize it. And I see it a lot at work. I see people who are so nosy and they're so worried about what other people are doing, and it's like, uh, to really use the full capacity of your brain as much as you can, and your spirit and your energy. Uh, uh, Turn all that off. Turn everyone else off. Who cares? Focus on what you're doing, and you'll have a lot more energy, to use for what you really want in life. And I think that's what scares people, is that once they internalize that awareness, they realize that they're actually really dumb, or they're ignorant, and they know nothing.
Mm. And so, what about how's this work when you juxtapose it with your desire to shift things within the world or create some change within the world? Um, do you actually? Maybe I should. I took a few steps too far. Do you desire to create change in the world?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh God, no. I
No.
See, that's the thing though. My you could say my belief system takes care of that. See, Hindus believe that everything is actually perfect.
Mm.
Okay, it's different than Buddhists. Buddhists believe that the work that they're doing, will ultimately spread peace and love and happiness. And perhaps the Hindu thinks that as well, but that's not their intent. Um, uh, and Buddhists tend to think that everything is sorrow, whereas Hindus think that everything is perfect, and
Mm.
the sorrow in the world is perfect, and the imperfection is perfect, and other people flailing about, trying to find an answer for something, is perfect, and the death of a loved one is perfect. um, and it's just, it's you could challenge that belief, but no one has any proof against it anyways, so that doesn't matter anyway. All I know is that I'm focused on, what I'm doing and what my family, is doing, and my direct family, my spouse and my child. And that's what matters to me, not what my neighbor thinks. Or now, the distinction between this as an educator and a teacher is when someone comes to you,
Okay.
like you did. Okay, now I'm happy to be concerned with the podcast on this episode, because you've involved me in it. You've come to me and said, "Why don't you sit for this show?" If someone came to me and said, you know, I just need some support here, then I will extend every ounce of energy I have to make sure that I've done what I can to help this other person or this entity. See, there's a difference there, and that's where energy management is crucial, because it requires reciprocation. Okay, if you
Mm.
don't have reciprocation of energy, your energy is flowing out, right? That's why men shouldn't, use pornography, because their energy is flowing out, and there's no other love interest in person, reciprocating that, right? Young men have asked me, time and time again, why can we have sex with another person but we can't use pornography? And I say, well, because when you're with someone, they are helping you to reciprocate all of these wonderful energies that are going about. But with pornography, it's just a waste, right?
Mm.
With your neighbor who just wants to vent, it's a waste. With your mother who calls you and just starts spouting off about her political views, it's a waste, because there won't be any reciprocation there. You can't change mom's political views, just like you can't change, how much of an asshole your boss may be. So you don't want to waste your energy. You only want to devote your time and energy to reciprocation.
So you mean don't waste your energy on trying to change someone who's not open to changing, or helping someone move through their suffering who's not open to receiving your help. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess like classroom teachers have it the hardest, right? Because kids just show up, and it's like, okay, I've got to teach these kids. But the privilege of being an adult means that you get to keep some sense of selfishness for your own energy, and you don't have to go about saying, I can save him, I can save her, I can help her. I know the problem here. I know it. I see the problem. I wish they could see it like I see it. But that's silly. That's a waste, and you don't want to do that. And you drain yourself, and you lose expectation, and you get disenchanted with the world, and think that I don't know, that you can't do something, or no one's listening, and that's just, you've overextended yourself, and you've overstepped your bounds. And a spiritual powerhouse, I think, knows that they need to keep their mouth shut when no one is asking them any questions.
Hmm. Right. And what if your son's not asking you any questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we'll find out.
I know it's 2.5 now. He's asking you plenty of questions, but
Let's go back to some sense of responsibility and parental duty. I would say that um, within the household, it becomes your duty, since you've created a thing, this creature, and I think it becomes a sort of a dharma, a duty, and a mission in life, to steer them for as long as you can, and because they won't ask, and they don't want your advice for the most part, but uh, you know, you've gone. I think you've done enough to where you have the privilege of helping them out until they're 18 years old, or however long they're out of the house for. Now, I think maybe the skill of becoming a worthy parent is to guide the child, maybe without forcing them to do um, anything that they don't want to do. I don't know. I mean, yeah, my mom did that, I guess. My mom didn't really raise me too much, and I was a criminal. So maybe there's a problem there. Maybe when you have like this direct relationship, that it becomes your duty or something. I don't know.
we'll dive into your journey in a moment. But what comes to me when you just shared that is my daughter, who's 3 years old, loves reading her books. She'll kind of just take a book, go off to the side, and she'll just read her book. She'll take a pile of them and she'll just be reading. I suspect that a big part of that, right? A lot of parents would love their kids to do that and to read on their own. Most of the time,
Yeah.
kids will only read when it's with the parent because it's a way that they get attention from the parent. And the parent's just thinking, "Oh my god, no! Okay, find another book. Okay, I'll read that book again for the 30th time." And the parents are a little bit resistant to it, but it's kind of the way that the kid can get attention. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
can you read the book for me?
Yeah.
What I've been doing with my daughter since pretty much since she was born has been reading with her. I'll usually, in the beginning, I'll just be reading my books or just showing her pictures in her books. When she was about 10 months old, she could kind of turn pages of those big fat books herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
She'd be reading through her pile of big fat books while I'm reading my book next to her. And so she'd continue to see me read. And as a result, that would inspire her to want to read now. And I've had parents of other kids in her childcare. I've had the educators in her childcare as well. Go, oh, I'm amazed by how well she can read. She can just take it if she's a little bit frustrated or she doesn't want to be around the group, or she'll just go and get a book and she'll just read, and she's got that. Other kids don't have that capacity
Yeah.
because they haven't learned it. They'll need someone to read the book for them, or someone to entertain them, or someone to always calm them down. And I suspect the reason for that is because of uh, intentionally shown her the way rather than told her the way forward.
Yes. Yes.
And I have a hunch that's from when I was listening to you sharing, like, don't waste your energy, like don't give your energy away when it's not reciprocated. I suspect that's the more tangible interpretation, is be there for people through your actions as opposed to being there by changing their actions.
Yes, yes, yes. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, and they say, children learn through imitation mostly.
Hmm.
Um, and so to do well and to act and behave well, um, hopefully there'll be some sort of good example that you're setting by just being. I guess that's what we all hope. I mean, if a child, has had previous lives and we go down that route, um, they're gonna be someone so quickly, and they are someone right away. It's
Hmm.
fascinating to watch, right? As you've seen, um, and my daughter had opinions. Um, I think like the second day she was alive, she wanted certain things and didn't want other things, and um, to watch that kind of shows that I mean, we can only do so much at the end of the day. And we see people come from wealth and we see people come from poverty, and the children, some will succeed when they came from nothing, and others who were given everything will fail miserably. Um, I don't think it's the luck of the draw. I just think it's this karmic aspect of who people already are, and it's important, I think, to help try to shape it, especially if it's your responsibility. Um, but you know, I think maybe there's too much expectation that a child should be a certain way or something like that. And gosh, to think that we have some sort of influence over it, I think uh, we get lucky maybe when they come out fantastic and spectacular.
Yeah, I like what you're sharing here. I mean, it's yeah. Look, yeah, there's a lot to dive into in what you shared, but I want to make sure that we're giving the listeners more context into how you've become who you are and who you've become, um, because that might and then we can circle right back around to what do you do with that, right? Like what do you do with what you've learned as a monk? So maybe tell me a little bit about your childhood and then what led you into becoming a monk.
Okay, so there's nothing special there. The I had separated parents early on, so I'm going to dad's house, I'm going to mom's house, and my time is split between two parents in Chicago, south suburbs of Chicago. And early on, I find uh, themes like gangster rap. I listened to when I was a child. Um, you know, right away, kind of as I was getting older, I thought that being a criminal was kind of the way to become a man. I was being influenced by what I was watching and listening to, and our neighborhood was being gentrified from the 1990s movement of inner city gangs moving down into the suburbs from uh, the blocks of Chicago. Uh, they call it the Wild Hundreds. So from 0 to 100, kind of making your way to the city, you get these numbered streets, and there was a massive amount of gentrification going on to where these gangs were moving down into the suburbs and catching those surrounding suburbs of that right off of those numbered blocks, and they were basically being pushed down via higher rent and everything because the city was trying to improve itself. So my neighborhood went from very normal, kind of peaceful kids on bicycles and everything playing baseball to if you left your bicycle outside it was going to get stolen. There were fights, people were starting to bring weapons to school and drugs came in. So I got mixed up in some of that culture. I became a drug dealer early on, maybe when I was 15, and I was really good at it. I was very driven. I've always been driven at whatever I've done, and that's the thing with willpower, right? It goes both ways. You can be very good at doing something very bad, and if you have the will to do it. So I was getting in trouble with the police and everything, and I got kicked out of the town that I grew up in after I graduated high school. So I had to move to Indiana with my mom, and because I was banned from all public facilities, and so I was driving home one night when I was, gosh, must have been 18, yeah, yeah. I was driving home one night from the city with a trunk full of drugs that I had just picked up from Chicago, and I was down the street from my house, my mom's house, and I got pulled over by a police officer. And so he had me come around to the get out of the car and come around to the trunk, and he had a dog with him. It was a canine unit, and the dog was going crazy, and he asked if he could search my trunk, and if he could search my car, and he asked if he could search me, and I said yes, and at that point I guess I kind of just I knew my time in the free world was over for now, and I was pretty sure I was going to go to jail. Um, and he sort of looked at me for about, maybe 5 seconds in silence, and that's a long time in silence. If I were to just stare at you for 5 seconds, it would be pretty awkward. And he puts his flashlight away, and he says, "I trust you." And he walks back to his car, and he does a U-turn and drives off down to the main road. And I'm sort of standing there in awe, that I've sort of just been given a second chance at everything. And I perceived it that way. See, some people might say, "Okay, I got off lucky, great, great for me." But I was, sort of a thinker at that time, and I realized what had just been granted to me. So I changed my life from that time on. I started a business with my friend, an asphalt business, and vowed to never break the law again. And so in Indiana, here we are, young guys, 19, 20 years old, or 18, 19, 20, doing this asphalt business, making a lot of money, doing really well. But we were miserable, absolutely miserable. I don't know, it was like too much money too soon. And we were just working really hard, but we would make $3,000 a day sometimes. And we would spend it just as fast. So my roommate and my business partner uh, gave me a book by a monk one day when it was raining for about 7 days straight. We couldn't work in the rain. And so he was kind of spiritual and everything, and he found this book by a monk, by Paramahansa Yogananda, right, called The Autobiography of a Yogi. You may have heard of it. Amazing book. And he said, "You got to read this. You got to read this book." And I did. I did what he said because he was kind of a longtime friend and everything, and I always did what he said. I finished reading the book, and I sort of had this intense desire to renounce the world and just try to discover what consciousness was, and to do what this monk had done. And I said, "That's it. I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna give up the business and everything, and I'm gonna I'm gonna become a monk somehow, and I'm gonna meditate."
This was at
And
20 years old, was it?
yeah, 1920. I did. That's exactly what I did. I gave my business to a friend because my other business partner and my good friend, he left the business as well. He was kind of sick of it. I gave the business to my friend who was now a felon. He got out of prison and he needed something to do. So I gave him the company and I gave him all my clients. I had a small book of clients, and he could take off from day one and start living pretty well with it, with all the clients that we had. And we had law offices, and we had restaurants, and we did parking lots and asphalt driveways. We did very well. So he did that, and my sister, my eldest sister, said, "I'll take you to the jungles of Hawaii, and I lived there in the wild before, and I'll show you how to live, and so you could find yourself."
This was your sister, was it?
Yeah, yeah. It was my oldest sister. My middle sister did the same thing, but in Spain. Um, so I was going on like a soul searching journey, I guess. But to me, um, I was going to kind of discover the essence of consciousness.
Mm.
That's and so my dad bought me a plane ticket, a one-way ticket, because I made a deal with him. He said, this was around Katrina, Hurricane Katrina hitting New Orleans, Louisiana, real bad, right, and flooding all the lower Ninth Ward and everything. My dad said, if you come with me and spend a week there helping people and gutting homes and everything, so the home doesn't get knocked down, um, I'll buy you your $500 ticket to Hawaii. And so I did. I did that with him, and he bought me the ticket. And my sister and I went to Hawaii. And she was gonna train me for a month and then go back to where she was living in Texas because she had a family and everything. And long story short, I mean that's where I found the monastery. I begged I begged entrance into the monastery, and they said no when I first started asking if I could become a monk. And eventually they let me in, and that's how I ended up staying for the 12 years.
Right. Okay. Well, what was it like as well? An amazing story, by the way. Also, really interesting that your family is what ultimately guided you um,
Yeah, yeah,
to be able to do the soul searching. Right. You already had the inspiration around you that made it kind of like opened you up to this idea of doing soul searching or trying to understand
yeah,
consciousness. Do you,
yeah,
do you
yeah,
think that would have happened if you hadn't had that type of inspiration around you? Like you obviously knew that your sisters had done it. One sister in Spain, the other one in Hawaii. Your dad obviously cared quite deeply or relatively deeply for people who were suffering.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He's a hospital. He was a hospital worker. He's retired now, but he's always cared deeply about the condition and welfare of other people.
mm,
Um, yeah, I don't. Up to that point, up to the first 20 years of my life and beyond, I had never thought about what's going to happen tomorrow. I was just living in the moment my
mm,
entire life up to that point. And honestly, that hasn't really changed. I am a firm believer, and I always have been, that um, you just work. If you're working towards something, it manifests. There's a connection there to the universe and attraction. And
mm.
I do believe in the law of attraction. I do believe that we manifest our reality. We create our own reality. Um, and for as kind of a ruffian as I was, I describe myself as a loser actually in my book. I was indeed like a no good. Um, I still kind of had that connection to the universe and that everything was meant to be. So I think maybe it would have happened, but it was so perfect the way my sister came up with the idea and had the experience, and my mom gave her blessing, and my dad's made the deal with me. It happened so fast. I didn't ever, until I was a monk, I didn't ever look back and say, wow, like all of this is perfect, I can't believe this. I never thought that.
Mm.
Even when we got to the island and we show up on the island, we get off the plane. We didn't have a plan. It was just, you know, we're just going to figure this out as we go. And sure enough, piece by piece of making it, around the island and surviving, and um, we lived off coconuts basically for the month. Um, to making it to the other side of the island to the monastery, and being rejected and then getting back in, and um it just, I never thought about it. I just did. I just moved. I knew that I wanted something, and I don't know. I just didn't believe in, I guess, giving up. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered.
Okay, so you moved through. Nothing really mattered. You say that that's quite similar. Like you've always been the type of person to want to live in the moment, and you still are today. You always were. Uh, but I don't get the sense from you that nothing matters. Like,
Well, and that may not be eloquent enough to really explain what I mean, but yeah, I mean, especially at the time, living or dying didn't matter. Not having food or money or shelter didn't matter. I didn't care. I just knew that I wanted to discover what consciousness was. I was meditating all day. I was eating very little. Um, with our business, we were trained in how to sell asphalt, and I just nothing mattered. There was no failure aspect or plan B. It was just okay. This is how you do it. So we knocked on doors to get our business, and it was not if you couldn't do it. It just that narrative didn't exist in my mind. Um,
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know why. I really don't.
Is that still the case for you now? Like, I mean, you referred to it as you've got your dharma, right? You've got you have your wife and you have your daughter, and you have more of a purpose now. Ultimately, people responsible for you, and you're responsible for them. Do you still feel the same way?
No, no, all of that changed certainly when we had a child.
Mm.
All of that changed, and my actions started to have consequences to me then, and there was an aspect of God, what if this doesn't work? Um, is this, how am I, you know, I, I went through when I got out of the monastery, I started working. I made my own company and everything, but a few years later, I ended up at NASA, working for NASA, and that was a 5 month process. I mean, our what Maya was, she wasn't born yet, and it was like, oh my God, what if I don't get the job? I don't make enough money now, and it was, California rent. We were in the highest rent in the country, and I needed that to succeed. And that's when I really started to think, what if this doesn't work? What if I think I went through some imposter syndrome, and what if life doesn't work out the way I think it does? And I guess I've compensated by just overcompensating. I just work twice as hard as I can, and it nearly kills me every time.
And does that help you? Like, did that help you meet your definition of success greater?
I didn't honestly don't think I've had that definition until a year or so ago.
Mhm.
Up until then, success was definitely making a profound impact of some sort. But I realized, and I'm always changing. I mean, I've changed every week since I've gotten out of the monastery to being an athletic trainer and a coach and a mentor, a nonprofit owner, and to, stocks, trading, stockbroker, finance, um, making a lot of money at a very short amount of time. And, the sky's the limit type deal. I go everywhere. I just go back and forth and everywhere that I can. And I think when I finish the grueling work of getting all my finance exams, I realized that it didn't really matter if I had succeeded or failed or gotten passed or failed or anything. I just was enjoying the process, enjoying the journey, and I had been a success the whole time.
Okay. Even if you didn't make it, right? Like, if you didn't pass the exams, if you didn't make it into NASA, you're pregnant with your kid, like all of that kind of stuff happening, right? And you
Yeah,
didn't get it, but you were enjoying yourself the whole way.
yeah, yeah.
Still a
I
success?
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And it just kind of hit me like all at once, like everything I think about does. I think about something intellectually for a few years, and then the experience, kind of the layers of concepts and reality come together all at once, and I internalize what was once intellectual. And it just happens like that every single time. And it it's funny because it's all true at the same time. Didn't matter, but it did matter. I knew I was going to succeed, but I had no idea at the same time. But it
Mm.
didn't matter. Like, I don't know. It's always been, it's always been, if this doesn't work, something else will. I don't know. But at the same time, that does, w- weigh a heavy toll on me and everything I try to achieve. It's extremely exhausting. But
What's the
like,
exhausting part?
it's exhausting because, each time you try to better yourself, you're really one-upping yourself, right? If we were to just do the same thing as humans, we would have no athletes, because the definition of an athlete is someone who can one-up a standard, right, and get better and better and better. So we're all kind of like the athletes of our own lives. And I'm just one-upping myself every time, and it's like getting into the monastery, getting away from crime, a life of like just uselessness and crime, um, becoming, trying to become this holy person, walking around NASA and making sense of it all, um, owning my own company and getting into finance. None of it was logical. There was no like, this is where I'm from, and this is the logical steps to get from point A to point B. It didn't make any sense. It was like, why are you at NASA? Oh, it's like, how are you passing the exams? And it's like, I don't have anything more than a high school education, but everything, it really is achievable. I mean, within limits, there are limits. Um, but if you understand calculated risk, you can really achieve what you set out to, as long as it's calculated. And I think underneath it all, I think I actually do calculate things.
Okay, you're now going to need to define calculating for me. And all of this in the context of you hear people say you can do anything you put your mind to, you can achieve anything, anything's possible. And sure, a lot of them will say within limits or whatever, but you can design the life that you want and you can do extraordinary things if you put your mind to it, per se. But how do you calculate it? Someone might be listening to this thinking, I'm in this job, I'm getting paid good money, but uh, my spouse and I are working hard, and we've got mouths to feed, and I know there's something else which is going to be more valuable or feels more purposeful. I know that I shouldn't stay in this job. Maybe that's what they're thinking to themselves, right? I can't continue to stay in this career, or I can, but it's just going to make me miserable. I know I need to make a change, but they're shit scared of it, right? Like they don't want to
Yeah,
do it. Like they're like, I got mouths to feed, I got all this responsibility, and in some aspect of themselves, they've probably got ego around making sure that they're seen as a success by people who are really important to them, and all that kind of stuff is probably coming up for them.
yeah,
And they're hearing this and they're going, I've done well for myself, but now I know that I need to, what you're referring to, one up myself, right?
yeah.
How do you calculate it? What advice would you give to them?
What I've always done is I've asked myself, has anyone done this before? And that's usually been my gateway or ramp to beginning. If it's been done before, then there's no reason on earth that I cannot do it. That's kind of what I've always calculated with.
Okay, so
Has
there are
anyone?
people who are already working at NASA, people who already passed the exams, people who have already studied and gotten the financing, whatever, with
Yeah,
kids and with people they're responsible for, people who have started businesses from nothing, people who have gotten
right,
out of jail and still been able to do well,
right,
right? All of that is that the stuff that you're thinking? There are people who have done something very similar to what I'm doing,
right,
and it's
right.
been done
And
before.
that's sort of been the catalyst to my moving forward with the project. Now, then you could go into the logic of, well, what if it's never been done before, right? And I mean, that starts to make where there's interesting calculations needed, right? There's just more more understanding of the situation, I think, needed. Now, when it comes to going into a monastery and living on a jungle and everything, I'm not sure if anyone has exactly, if I thought about it then like that. Like, has anyone done this? I didn't care at the time. I just knew that I was going to do it one way or another. But I started to realize after I got out of the monastery and I had to pay bills and things like that, that there is a wisdom in calculating, a risky move to, is this humanly possible? Is this really a good idea? And how can I mitigate risk? And I think to go, a slight tangent to but I think it's relevant, is that we are in an era of entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
Entrepreneurship is like the thing to do now. And I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I mean, entrepreneurship sucks so bad. It's so shitty. I hate entrepreneurship. I mean, I love the concept of it, of course, but the actual grind of it is so exhausting. And you can only it's only sustainable if you're willing to like go to the ends of the earth to succeed, because it's not guaranteed that you'll succeed. And I've tried. I've tried and I failed at some aspects of entrepreneurship. And my learning coming out of that is, um, don't start a business without working somewhere else. Have income coming in, uh, before like just thinking that you can start some business, because and that's calculated. I think, you know, I think that's the way to go about it without killing yourself.
So I've heard from you that you have a catalyst, right? As mainly, has anyone else done it before, right? You've thought about it and you're asking, has anyone done it before? If the answer is yes, or that people have done something somewhat similar, then work out the risk, mitigate it, create a plan, which I guess is basically the wisdom of applying the knowledge that you have.
Yeah,
And then you mentioned make it happen, which is kind of like drive, right?
yeah. Endurance.
Endurance. Yeah.
You need a sense of endurance in life, in anything, right? Like raising your child, you need endurance. You can't let them win when they want to win. And um, endurance when talking with other people and someone tries to pull you into their anger or something like that. You need to play it out, play the game. Don't let them win and pull you into anger. All kinds of things in life test us. I mean, every day. If we are doing something worthwhile, we're being tested. If you're not being tested, then great. I mean, then you're just coasting, and maybe that's what you want to do. But if you're gonna level up, you have to anticipate the barriers and the obstacles. Life is hard, right? If you're doing something difficult, life is hard.
Yeah. Should put
I
down a
mean,
t-shirt.
it's a simple concept, right? Right? It should be on a bumper sticker. It's a simple concept, but we forget about simple concepts being the most profound.
Okay, so we took a bit of a tangent
Yeah,
across
went into like
into
entrepreneurship.
entrepreneurship and the like. I mean, I'm still curious though. What we okay? There's a lot to explore. We're going to go all the way till next time, I think. What was it like as a monk?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, I got to live like the dream of any yogi. I got to be a soldier. I got to be a philosopher. I got to be all these different things, and just study myself, study other people, study religions, study consciousness. Um, I took myself through university type training. I studied psychology and war history, and I read everything from Plato. I read everything from Marcus Aurelius, and I read thousands and thousands of things. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that that happened in life, and I would do it again if I woke up and I was in the jungle again and begging entrance into the wall at 20 years old. I would be like, let's do it again. But if I did it again, I would like have Bitcoin or something.
So is that almost regret that you've just shared? Like, is that a sense of regret that you hold that
No,
you
no.
like you didn't make the investment you needed to? Or,
I make that joke
yeah,
all the time, all the time.
right.
No, no. No, I don't regret anything. And sometimes my mind will try to play that regret game and come up with something I wish I had done. So for example, I have to go in order to get my CFP certification, Chartered Financial Planner. I have to have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree, so I have to get a bachelor's degree. So I just applied last week to do an online bachelor's degree in finance, and my luckily my firm is paying for all of it and everything. But I could say, oh man, I wish I had a bachelor's degree. I wish I studied that or convinced the monks that I could do that or whatever. I mean,
Mhm.
it's endless the amount of things we wish we could have done, and it will never end. We'll always wish that, and it's just ridiculous to think that the past should have been different. I mean, the past was perfect. It happened exactly how it should have. And the beautiful thing about being consciously aware of who you are and how to orient yourself in the world and navigate chaos and order is that you are inside this moment now that affects the future. And you can fix anything right now. That's the best part of it. Not changing the past. That's stupid. But being able to like adjust your future, that's beautiful.
I suspect most people have the regret because they don't believe in their capacity right now to be able to change their circumstances.
I could see that.
Like
I
they
could see
wish
that.
they made better investments or different education or different career decision or whatever back in the day
Right.
because they don't have faith in themselves to be able to make better investment decisions right now to get to where they want. It's like it would be so much easier if I just had $2 million of assets to invest instead of 20,000, right? Like
Yeah,
wouldn't that
but
just be easier?
and it's like, okay, if I had known about, I guarantee, even if you knew about Bitcoin, you wouldn't have known how to buy any. Like,
Hmm.
how would you have even navigated, like, which, which exchange at that time would you have like synced your bank account to again?
Hmm.
Like, you wouldn't have because you wouldn't have trusted it. Or even if you owned Bitcoin, would you have held? Like, there's all these
Yeah.
things. Hindsight it's not fair to judge. It's so silly. It's not logical at all.
This is so I don't know if you're aware or not. Actually, I'm a financial coach and obviously teaching meditation with Jai. And people are like, "Oh, you're doing so many different things. Like you're doing all of these different things that are obviously completely different practices and disciplines." I'm like, no, they're pretty much the same thing. You're taking action to become you're assessing where you are to become more aware of what you're focusing on towards whatever caused you to want to make a change in the first place.
Yes.
So you have a goal of being able to buy your home or upgrade your home. Great. Well, that's just the catalyst, right? You've still got to work out where are you right now? Why do you want it? Why is that so important for you? What are the steps you could potentially take or what are the milestones you got to get to in order to get there? It still requires you to have awareness of where you are right now and why you have that particular desire. Not that the desire is bad. Desire is amazing. It moves us to do things, right?
Yes, yes, we need it. We need it.
We just need to also be aware when desire is driving us the wrong way or in a way
Yes.
which doesn't make us feel more fulfilled, right?
Yes, to course correct, to fix our path, to shift, to pivot in the world of entrepreneurship, to pivot as soon as, things are going south. That's a true skill. It's not that there's a skill in like starting a company and succeeding. It's I think most of the time it's knowing when to pivot.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point. So here's an example, right? A lot of the time, people will reach out to me because uh, they've looked into like they've tried to do some investments in the past. They've tried to manage their finances properly, and they're really kind of struggling ultimately because they've made some investments and it's gone down, and they're like, "Oh no, it's gone down so much." Right? Like to anyone who's watching or listening to this and who understands technical analysis, as an example, um, there's a reason for double tops and double bottoms, right? So, like, someone will buy in at a particular point if it collapses afterwards. When the price, or if the price eventually gets up to that original point that we were talking about, if it gets up there, then all those people who bought in there are going to be like, oh, finally it got back to where it was, right? 10,000 down to 5,000. And then they're thinking, oh, yes, it's finally back to 10,000. Let me sell out. Let me kind of reset, right? It's a psychological thing that they hold on to. And
Yes.
there's a psychological reason for all of that. But um, it's really interesting to see people who have made financial mistakes and then they keep thinking about where they came from.
Yeah.
and how much money they've lost and how far out of profit their positions are. And I'll share with them the analogy that on a chessboard, the reason why computers win more than people is not just it's not just because of how many moves forward they can think, right? That's not the main reason. The main reason is because they're not worried, they're not wasting computer power on what's happened in the past. They'd make
Nope.
the same machine would make the exact same decision if it played all the moves to the point it's at to make the next move, versus if you just showed it the board and said it's your move. It will make the same
Right.
choice. And so in that sense, it's like, okay, you don't have a $50,000 portfolio anymore. You've got a $30,000 portfolio. Imagine that this was a $30,000 portfolio given to you. You don't know what the price that you bought in at was. You don't know if they're in profit or in loss or whatever it is.
Right.
Would you still hold on to this? Would you still hold this company or this stock or this crypto or whatever? And then hear what their thoughts are. And it's so much more powerful because, right, you're now living in this moment. But to do that, you've got to be so aware of all the other stuff that's happening. Like even just recently, I made some changes to my own investments. I manage my own technical trading and very tactical and strategic swing trading accounts, both in crypto and in mainly US equities and some Aussie equities as well. And I decided to reduce exposure to the amount which I have in crypto because there's not that much volatility. Well, there's right now, but there wasn't that much volatility. And it's probably like, yeah, I don't expect there to be a huge amount of volatility in the coming year or so compared to what's happening in US equities. I might be wrong about that, by the way. To anyone listening, this is not financial advice. You don't even know what date this is recorded. There you go. So don't listen to me there. But it's really like I decided that I'm going to reduce the exposure there and move it across. Now, part of my investment strategy or part of my investment discipline is that I have small position sizes, so I'm able to continue to maneuver my way in and out of positions as I need to. And so for the majority of the time, I was only like 30 to 50% invested of my portfolio. But if I took out 50% of my portfolio, suddenly I was 80, 90% invested. So, oh boy, this isn't part of the strategy which I want to have. So I decided to reduce my exposure. And then I decided to reduce my exposure of the positions that I had, halving most of them. Now, crypto shot up.
Yes.
Now, most people in my position would be like, oh no, it happened too soon. Oh no, this is terrible. I got out too soon. I should have held on. I missed out on all of this. And right, at best case, they judge themselves. At worst case, they jump back into their positions and they lose all discipline, right? This is how psychology works. But I'd say that in an even better case is that you're aware of your emotions and you're aware of your strategy. And you've decided this is the decision I'm making now, knowing full well that it could go completely the wrong way in a few days. And I made that decision a few days ago, knowing that the market could shoot up or the market could pull down. And it's not a risk which I'm willing to take as part of managing my assets. And whatever happens is what's going to happen. And so someone might be listening to this going, okay, that's great that you shared that, Harry, but how do you actually do it? Well, I'm gonna say, listen to Raj explain about how to learn meditation towards the end of this conversation, or come along to one of the meditation masterminds I run with Jai. But another way that you can do it in the short term is to just ask yourself at the beginning, if I make this decision, what's the worst case scenario? Most people, when they're making investment decisions, they think, what's the best case? Where's this going to go to? What's my target? Even if they're not thinking best case scenario, they're thinking, what's my target? Why am I going into this? Great, because I'm expecting to be able to sell at a 20% profit later on. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking as often about what happens if the market pulls back. What happens if it drops down below where I'm going, or if I'm losing money on it? This is a bad scenario, right? And so you got to ask yourself in the beginning, if I make this decision, what's the best case? What's the worst case? Either investing in something or selling out of the investment. From you hearing this, I know you've got financial knowledge as well, but even when you then apply this to other areas of life, like parenting or marriage or being a friend or working hard in your career or whatever, do you see do you see it the same way? Is there something that you'd want to add to this conversation? That's what I shared.
Yes. Yeah, I think that the most beautiful thing about the market is that it does mirror all of life, and I think that's why I became a trader, especially with technical analysis and my love of psychology and watching the mind. Um, all of it, there's a bear case and a bull case to everything in life, and there's a reason that we buy into something in life, and we have to remember why. We have to talk ourselves through it. And I'm sort of a logical thinker. I think I'm fortunate in that way. Um, but emotion will get the best of you, and I s- whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, family or work or hobby or play and sports and whatever. Emotion seems to be the backbone of when things go wrong, and logic and reason help kind of guide a train on tracks, and the load gets heavier, it gets lighter, but you have to keep logic and not let emotion get after you. I mean, I think I had a really easy time the first 2 years so far with our daughter. Um, it hasn't really been that shocking. Like, and I think it's because it's just if you apply logic, you can kind of overcome anything that might be going on. And people
Can you
freak
give an
out.
example of that?
Yeah, like when people freak out when their child is freaking out. And I used to work with clients in a therapy type setting, and you see parents kind of go after each other, and either financial problems or the child is going crazy, and they blame each other. It's all emotion. It's all getting wires crossed because there's emotion. But if you remain logical and can detach your awareness from what's going on around you, nothing has to affect you. Nothing has to affect you, and it's very challenging. I say it, but it's not easy. But it is a real thing. It's a very real thing.
Is it still a challenge for you after 12 years of being a monk? And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. To me, there is no, mastery. There's just constant work. Um, I don't really believe in being a master and things like that. I think that you just get better at recovery times. You're you snap back to who you were faster each time. My guru would say that. There's not this aspect of perfection, but there's this sense of recovery. I think, and maybe something that used to bother you for a week bothers you for a day, and then bothers you for an hour, and then bothers you for 5 minutes, and then maybe a quick thought, and then boop, I snap back to who I was before the challenge occurred.
I had another guest. I can't remember the episode number, but with Matt Elliott, and he was a he was a sports coach, like a really high level peak athletes in Australia. And then he went on more of a spiritual journey, I guess you could say, when he faced a relationship breakdown. And one of the things that he shares is that in our mental well-being, per se, you have the concepts of resilience and of capacity. And most people will talk about your resilience and building your resilience, and it's this kind of buzzword which keeps going around, right? You got to be more resilient. Well, resilience is what you're referring to, right? Well, at least what you referred to then, but the opposite of what you referred to everywhere else. You're referring to the resilience of if you have an injury, how quickly can you get back to training again? When you when you're lifting weights and you're tired or you've done a big workout and you're exhausted, how soon is it again until you can go for another run or do another workout or lift some more weights, right? That's your resilience, how quickly you can
Yeah,
get back to where you were. And
sure.
then you compare that with the notion of capacity. And capacity is how heavy the weights are or how many weights you're able to lift up in a session, or how far that you're able to run. Right? That's all in the physical setting, but it applies the exact same way to our mental abilities, right? Like how It's not just the resilience of someone says something which triggers you. How quickly can you get back to the way you were beforehand? But it's also how can you grow? How can you be a student? How can you continue to learn so that that doesn't even become a problem that pushes you down? That you need bigger problems that are going to push you down. What did you learn in your time as a monk or while in monastery that has reinforced this for you? Because I see you doing both from just what you've shared now.
Capacity is a beautiful concept, amazing concept, and you're right. And it goes back to that sense of one-upping yourself. The things that you previously encountered will no longer have the same effect in the future, the more you expose yourself to them. And so we do want that sense of increased capacity for load or stress. Um, and yeah, in the monastery, you're stressed beyond capacity. And the theory is that if we can overdo it on him, then he will eventually adapt and he will grow stronger from that thing and be able to conquer twice as much when we throw the next thing at him. And they did that through various ways. One of the things I learned was through sleep deprivation. Being allowed to sleep. And I know Jai can wax ad nauseum about sleep deprivation, but being up in the middle of the night in the temple on these 3-hour shifts and only getting a few hours of sleep before you go back to work, and you tend to be hardened, and you're a bit numb to sleep deprivation, and so you tend to look at life and other people going through challenges, and you think, you know, not a big deal, not a factor that would stop me at all, and it's not necessarily correlated. Just like if I get less sleep, I can go on and get better at less and less sleep. It's if I can live without sleep for 9 months, or much sleep in that 9 month period, then I can possibly see the futility in getting frustrated when I don't do something right at work. Because the moment you get a full night's sleep, it's like you can conquer anything, and really nothing is that big of a deal. Or sleeping on a concrete floor, I did that for 6 months, and every night, I kid you not, years later, every single night, I'm still grateful that we have soft things to sleep on.
Mm.
And it totally changes the way I look at life and life's normal luxuries. You see them with gratitude. And I think a lot of this comes back to gratitude. Capacity, I think, has something to do with gratitude. And if you can appreciate the things that you have and not get lost in all of the uh, you know luxury that we have, then you can take on more. You can increase your capacity. It's a Stephen Covey teaching, and Stephen Covey is someone that taught me almost everything I still use today. Um, Especially in terms of capacity. Like when you're driving, it's so easy to get upset at other drivers, but you're like in a thing that is delivering you at lightning fast speeds and changing your life. See, if you were lost in the awe of how perfect everything was, your capacity would naturally increase. You wouldn't have to work on it. There's no, I'm going to work on capacity today by eating a little bit more or eating a little less. It's, I'm going to have gratitude for like the farmer that grew this and brought it to my plate and appreciate it. That's kind of the idea of Covey of, of not working on character, but working on your perspective. If you can change your paradigm, then your character and attitude change automatically. And I don't know if you've heard that from Covey before.
Mm.
He used to be a motivational speaker back
Yeah, I've got
maybe
one
in
of his books here.
the Seven Habits.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, he's known for the Seven Habits. It's amazing if you can internalize those habits. Um, but it's so perfect. It's so beautiful. A lot of us spend a lot of time on character and attitude, chipping away at this, fixing our routine and fixing diet, and fixing our speech, um, and listening to other people. And there's all these little micro changes we can make to ourselves. But if we change our paradigm, Covey's theory was that we can change character and attitude all at once, and instantly be changed and affected. And it's true. It's absolutely true. Um, at work, I could worry about getting a promotion. I could worry about competing with other people. But if I was grateful for the very fact that I was employed at a reputable place and taken care of, and if I could keep that gratitude, then whether I'm promoted or not is secondary. It's absolutely secondary because of all the good things that you have in life. It's one of the challenges of one-upping yourself is still keeping gratitude.
Okay. Yeah, because of course, right? You want to do better, and you've set a target for yourself. And then if you don't achieve that target, then you're just like, oh man,
Yeah,
I haven't
and it's
achieved the
just like
target.
you forget about this mountain of success that you're on and
Mhm.
achievement and things that you've conquered, and it's like you lose that last goal, and it's like, well, I'm a failure. But that's silly.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people admire and express a lot of love for their child when they see their child doing something which is challenging and then be able to overcome it. And it's like, or I can see people inspired by how amazing their child is that the child's able to take their first steps and be able to walk. It's like, oh my God, they do it. And it's so amazing. And they're clapping for it, right? Like the way that they'll cheer for someone who's, I know, their favorite basketball player in an NBA game or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And they're cheering for it and they're like, wow, it's so inspirational. It's like, do you know how many millions of freaking steps you've taken in your life? Like, have you ever
yeah,
worked that out? Like, even if you're kind of, I don't know, on the less active, I was going to say lazy, but that's judgmental. On the less active side, you're only doing like 2,000 or 3,000 steps a day or something. Do you know how many steps that is over your lifetime since you're able to walk? Why can't you just congratulate yourself for the thousands of steps that you're taking each day, as opposed to judging yourself that you're not good enough, but inspired by your child taking their first steps?
yeah. And it's because it's happening outside of yourself, right? It's why it's so easy to be a therapist, because the problem is happening outside yourself. And so
Mm.
we're very good at watching things and observing things and judging. Judging is basically the basic motivation for every task we can ever complete in a given day. But the ability to judge ourselves and to look inward, I mean, that's yoga. Like, that's real yoga, and that's a craft that one should study, and take on that study every day, until we die. I mean, essentially.
I just had a chat this morning with one of the participants from most recent meditation mastermind, which is Meditate with Purpose. And she was sharing how before attending the mastermind, which I think started in November, it's now mid-Jan for those people who are wanting to know the date. Um, the she would struggle because she needed a lot of support from her various support networks, which included her therapist and acupuncturist and um, counselor and a whole bunch of different people who support her. And then she'd find it really challenging. I'm obviously not going to say a name or anything, but she found it very challenging when it would be the holiday season and everyone would just kind of switch off for 2 to 4 weeks. All of the
Yeah.
supports would go on holidays, and then suddenly she's got nothing. What she shared with me this morning, though, is that this time she didn't need any of the supports. Even though her therapist was like, "Look, I know this can be really hard for you. I'm only taking one appointment the whole holiday period, and it's with you right in the middle of it." And the therapist was saying to it, like, "Whatever you've been doing, keep doing that." And
Fantastic.
because it's like that's the change that you can make from having more awareness within yourself and becoming the support for yourself. It's
Yes.
game changing, right? Because all we did with her was literally just focus on what's going on inside and challenge yourself on, if you're able to, if you easily could, would you let that go? That challenge, that resistance, that frustration. Not a maybe or a sort of or a whatever. It's a yes or a no. Would you let it go? And she's just able to now challenge within herself, which I think is game changing because so many. Sorry, what triggered that that spiel was, or that not even side tangent, but what triggered that was you sharing. It's easy because it's outside of you, right? A lot of therapists, they can do their job reasonably well. However, they're not great examples of uh, people living what they're helping or supposedly helping other people move towards,
Sure. Yeah.
because it's outside of them. They don't have to do the work inside.
Right.
But there's so, man, just to kind of bounce off with what you're saying, like there's so much value in doing the inner work. I had Henry Schuckman, I recorded a conversation with him recently. He wrote One Blade of Grass. Amazing journey, amazing individual. He's a Zen Buddhist teacher now. And he shared with me that it's grief that unlocks your ability to experience more in life. All your growth comes from grief, nothing else.
I
Like
like that a
grief is the
lot.
cornerstone. It's the center of it.
Well, I wrote a book called Everything Is Your Fault. And the idea
I like the name.
behind the idea behind that book is that you essentially find responsibility when life is terrible, when it's terrible. And it's this Jordan Peterson type of philosophy where all we're doing is navigating chaos. It's not if chaos comes at us, it's when and how do we transform chaos into order. And that which is terrible and that which is really um, the mythological dragon of chaos breathing fire on us, that's what we're born into. That's what the Hindu calls Shakti, the feminine aspect of energy, which it can be pure evil, it can be chaos and dread and horror and murder and hunger, that which ends life and is the dark side of everything and every hole and every like monster underneath the bed. Like we want that. We want exposure to that. But we want calculated exposure. We
Mm-hmm.
we want just 1 foot. We're not jumping. We're not like leaping into the dragon's mouth or into Moby Dick's whale. Like we're just kind of creeping over the corner to see if we can see it, and we observe it, and then we slowly start to walk forward. But we always anchored in order. And if we can do that, then we can kind of one up ourselves on a daily basis or a weekly basis without exhaustion. That's energy management. It's just 1 foot in chaos, 1 foot in order, and kind of the balancing act is responsibility. And if we can somehow be responsible, even for grief, if we can be responsible for pain and say this is my fault or whatever it is, I can somehow help and fix it in my own life, not with other people, but in my own life, then I'm never without a solution. If it's my fault, I'm never without a solution or an opportunity to change or fix. And it's this mentality that I think can truly save you through anything. And maybe that's what I've had all along without knowing it. Um, I don't know, but I know now,
Is
at
there a
least.
difference between the terms fault, responsibility, and blame?
There could be, but I don't know if it matters. I mean, whatever you want to call it, perhaps it's semantic, but you don't want to get regretful. You don't want blame to turn into, oh no, this shouldn't have been.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. What
Right.
we're
So
talking about
this
is
is this
what.
is because of me. This is I'm responsible for what's happening and what's happened, but that doesn't mean you judge yourself for it, right?
Correct, correct. And that's where people get caught with everything is your fault. And it's like, well, how could this be my fault? And that could possibly lead you down a rabbit hole of grief, but that can't be solved. But the idea with the next few pages in the book is that it explains the idea behind this is a healthy responsibility to change what's coming next from what has happened. Not, I wish I could go back in time and fix this. Not
Hmm.
that, not that. Or maybe you get robbed at gunpoint or something. It's like, is that your fault? Well, that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is how you behave in the days and the weeks and the months after the traumatic event is your fault. It's your responsibility, and you can certainly um, work within your psyche to change however you feel about the world and about people and about guns, etc.
So you could almost share with someone who's listening, saying, great, let's just say that I know the person listening to this is 35 years old or 40 years old. The last 40 years, okay, fine. Let's just kind of try and let that go. You're working on
It's a
yourself,
wash.
whatever, right? That's a lot that's there. But after the next week, and you commit to this new type of perspective, after next week, when you look back, you can say, well, this last week, that was my fault. That was my responsibility. I can take ownership of that. And I guess the
Correct.
other part that you're sharing is also how much you let the past influence you is also your fault, your
Correct.
responsibility.
Correct. Right. And when I used to do podcasts, we had a podcast called Man in the Making. Me and a student of mine, we did 3 years of it. We had some amazing guests who were able to kind of reinforce this idea, and they did that by sharing absolute horrific trauma that had happened to them.
Mm,
And because we can all read about trauma, we can all like say, oh, if this happened, I could get through it because I have willpower or something. But these people like actually lived it, like
mm,
really bad stuff. And we had some episodes that were really hard to record, and they came out of it with that same sense of responsibility. Not that they could have changed what had happened to them, but they were not going to let it affect the rest of their life and let the other person win. But they weren't going to be the victim, so to speak.
mm,
And that's kind of the reason behind the title. And I think that, and again, it hit me in layers, going from criminal youth to narcissistic and being in the monastery and trying to work with other people for the first time, trying to work with people harmoniously was so hard because I was a narcissist and I thought I was really on top of everything. I thought I was the best at everything. And it just hit me all at once. I realized I was the villain of my own story, and I had to change it. And everything that was going on was indeed my fault. Like I was the asshole in the story,
mm,
and it was like the best thing that ever happened to me because I could now be someone else. I could now change. Not, oh, woe is me. I wish I hadn't have done that. No, I could, from that moment on, taking each and every step, I could be the the new person in my life. And yeah, I think that was the idea behind the book.
But you got to have that belief in yourself, right? Like you got to have the belief that you're able to shift it. I'll I'll share with you. I'm really enjoying this because it's what you're sharing is kind of like connective material between a lot of the messages of a lot of the other people, a lot of the other guests on this podcast. Um, the example from Vin Jiang is he was a magician. He turned into a like a keynote speaker on communication and educator and connection as well. He's a pretty cool guy on the world stage, and he shares about how he loves magic because he can create a new reality. He can create an alternate reality. Whatever he wanted to create on the stage or in that experience was what he wanted to create. Right? There's this
Yeah,
element of creating a new you and believing in it. And when you believe that it's possible, if you're the one that believes that it's possible, then you're going to do it. Like I can't, like, yeah, I think I've heard him actually give the example before. But like, for example, if you're like, hey, you believe you can do anything, well, why don't you just get me more hair or get my hair back? It's like, look, I'm not the one that's going to do that. Someone who believes it's possible is going to be the one that's going to get your hair back. But they need to believe that that's possible first. You need to believe it's going to help you. Another guest, Ben Salkold, he talks a lot about like he helps men basically reclaim their lives back, middle-aged men,
good.
and he focuses on this idea of comfort. It's like people don't realize how much comfort they've got. They've got air conditioning, we've got warm showers, we've got food, which is just easily available. In fact, just a few clicks away, and we don't realize how much comfort we have. But growth doesn't come
Mhm.
from comfort. Growth comes
Right.
from discomfort that we're able to live. Another guest, Martin Budin, he great engineer, innovator, also a property developer and investor. Amazing guy, one of my close mentors. And he shares about when talking about regret, he's like, you just kill it straight away. And then it's like, well, what about if you don't think that you're successful enough? If you've Like if you don't think that you're able to anymore because you didn't do the hard work in your 20s and now you're in your 30s and 40s. It's like, well, look, if you believe that, fair enough. That's true. Yeah, cool. You're right. If you believe it, you're right. Right?
Yeah.
They're all they're all sharing these same things. I could go through
Yes.
every single one. I
Yeah.
suspect they'll all share the exact same message or that
Yeah.
aligns with what you're sharing here.
Yep.
Right? Back to being able to take responsibility without having the blame, like without having the judgment on yourself, because the judgment's just going to impede you, right?
Yeah. hmm
Now,
And
what
it's not a new concept. It's not. It's not. To think that this is new would be extremely scary to hear. If you read philosophical works from thousands of years ago, they're saying the same thing. All of it is repeating itself, and it's so interesting to think about. I mean, what does that even mean? I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes me think that we're all one, and it's all just different bodies, and I think it kind of reinforces my own religious and spiritual foundation in the end. But that's too much for some people. That's too sappy. It's too much of a bridge they can't cross. But
I'd love to hear what you think what you think about this, like this concept, which has been around for thousands, who knows how many thousands of years, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. What that, maybe 10, maybe 50,000 for all we know, whatever, when the pyramids were built. But let's just let's just say that like people are listening to this and they're not in the world of thousands of years ago. In fact, they're in a very different world. We've got social media and all of these additional challenges which are around us, and we've got a lot of work that needs to be done to maintain a particular level of lifestyle that we want to have, even vastly different to 20 or 30 years ago, like is what is today. And someone's listening to this now, and think to yourself, you're speaking to someone who's in their mid 30s to mid 40s, and they're doing well in their career. Think to that person. They're hearing us talk, if they've stayed with us for this long, and they're hearing us talk about this idea of personal responsibility and taking the responsibility. When obviously in corporate environment and in most areas of society, you tend to be positively reinforced when you blame it on someone else, and then it's not your fault anymore, right? How do we apply that now?
well, there has to be a problem. There has to be a catalyst. It's not like I'm gonna wake up and change and be better because my wife blames me for my snoring and I take responsibility. It's that's not profound enough. It's not enough. It's not that big of a deal. There's got to be a moment where it works for you to take genuine responsibility, and it works. Like there's a difference. There's a positive outcome, and you're better for it, and the surrounding area is better, and people around you are better for it. That's the way it's going to be internalized, and then you'll just keep doing it and repeating it over and over again. But if everything is like, if you're at work and you're making good money and you got kids and you're happy and you got a place to live and things, you're good. I would say nothing to this person. And it's the person that is like disgusted. That's who's easy to help if they want it, because they see the dark side. You need to see like the filth of what you could really be and what you've become. And you need to be a monster for a bit. Then it's like tell that person to take some responsibility for it. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'm not interested in the people that are like they're pretty good. I could be even better, but I'm pretty good right now. Then it's like good luck, man. That's great. Love it. But the person who's like disgusted, that's my fascination with what to say to them. And
And
it's
I'm
like
curious. I'm curious to hear what you say to them, but I'm also really curious for the primary listeners to this podcast ultimately, or to these conversations. They're those people who are doing pretty well. They know that something's missing. They know that something's wrong.
if you know that something's missing, if
Right.
you do think that something's wrong, I mean, you have to take everything that comes at you and filter it through uh, responsibility. Like At that point, you have to take everything, and it starts with being uncomfortable as you walk outside of the door, maybe being late. It has to start with the small things then. It has to
Mm.
start with your car, driving. Um, Someone cuts you off, you got to blame yourself. Someone's in front of you, someone's behind you, and they're just up on your bumper. It's your fault.
Mm.
If something at work pisses you off, it's got to be your fault. You've got to take all those little steps because you don't have that really big paradigm shift. It's got to be the small things then. It's like the death of a thousand cuts, and it's a death to your ego. And uh, you've got to incorporate it somehow in your life. If everything's going good, but you just want to one up yourself, probably the Bruce Lee method of making things harder for yourself is going to be the better way. Don't eat that day.
Mm.
Just do something harder. Bruce Lee would be walking on the sidewalk and he would see a hill and he would just decide to run up the hill.
Mhm.
And it was just because it was harder to run up the hill instead of go around it. So
Yep.
the obstacle becomes the way, right? The beautiful, beautiful quote of the obstacle becoming the way. That needs to be your new life mission. If you're not working on anything else.
I like what you're sharing, and what I've seen from experience with working with clients, but also from my own personal experience, is you start to do that with the little things, right? You even start to do that with the thoughts in your mind. You can start taking responsibility for how much attention you give them when you're sitting down and doing absolutely nothing, and you're just breathing, and you're getting distracted by something, and you take responsibility for the fact that your stomach growling leads you to thinking about what's in the fridge, realizing there's nothing there, and then going, crap, well, that's because you didn't buy the right things or whatever, and now you see you're terrible and you're useless and whatever, and taking responsibility for allowing yourself to go down that path to leading to self-judgment and then intensifying the emotions. But I suspect, like, you're talking about, the comfort of being late or someone not replying to you on time or something wrong happening or bad happening or whatever it is. And you continue down that path, or you notice whatever's most relevant. It intensifies naturally over time as you're focusing on taking the responsibility for everything that happens. Like your boss doesn't approve of something that you thought that they would, or a colleague writes you a nasty email, or your kid doesn't do the things you want them to do, or your spouse doesn't smile or become happy when they see you. Your fault. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that those things will just naturally intensify over time.
Yeah, and it'd be hard to face, really. And what you reminded me of and inspired me by was something that kind of is I think more important here is the people that think like everything's going good and there's just a missing thing there. I think my work as a therapist in psychology was revealing to people that they're actually lying and it's not as good as they say it is, and they're not as great as they say they are. And I bet that if you kind of peeled open some of that onion a little bit, you'd actually reveal to them that they were actually kind of awful inside, and they're not being truthful with themselves or you, and they're lying.
I think getting most people to just look at their own social media profiles and rate how much better that person's life is than their own would do
Yeah,
that job pretty well, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Are things going really well and with someone? Probably not. Probably not. Because I mean, there's always something to fix. There's always something there. There's always something that you messed up on and that you need to atone for somehow.
Yeah,
Um,
people don't post that much about that on social media, right? Like
oh
they're much
no.
more likely to post the photo of their kid smiling in the perfect pose rather than the kid going, "Ah," or
Yeah,
screaming,
exactly.
"I hate
Yeah.
you," right?
And
Like
I've
they're not
loved
gonna.
those photos of my daughter, like when she's pissed off and everyone else is smiling, trying to force her to smile, because she's really pissed. I love posting those because it's like, see, like there is no smile here for her this moment. She's upset, and it's like this is all we had. And
Hmm.
my wife hates it, but it's like that's real. That's real. But I ended up getting rid of Instagram anyway, so my life got better.
No, there's a mate of mine is a photographer came by when my daughter was just around 12 months or so, and he tried to take a photo of her, and she had a bit of a emotional breakdown. And he had his film camera, right? It's not digital where you can take a million shots. He was right at the end. He only had 2 shots left, and he tried to take some shots, and he captured the truth in that moment, which was her screaming with tears coming down her face for absolutely no reason at all. Like, perfect day, beautiful day behind, and there's greenery and everything's wonderful. And she's just not enjoying that particular moment. The negative emotions are the ones which are coming through her, which is actually
Yeah,
beautiful that was coming through. And I've got that
absolutely.
photo, and it's beautiful. And
I
it
love that. I love that. That's it. That's it.
so maybe more on a practical note for people listening, right? We've spoken a lot about a lot of things, and
Yeah.
this notion of personal responsibility might be a lot to hear. But then what about like the power of meditation as a skill? Like what's the power of it for you?
Yeah. Well, it's a way of it is a way to reveal things to yourself, who you really are. I mean, that's the beauty of isolation of thought. I mean, you get to kind of empty some space and time in your schedule, reveal like what's really in there. And once you start to kind of cancel out ideas like apps on your phone, you kind of realize that these things aren't can't there is no X. Like they don't go away. It's like, okay, there's a problem in there. I can't even control my own mind. And meditation is just the gradual practice of controlling your own mind and revealing like the perfection of who you really are to yourself over time. And it's as simple as you want it to be, or it's as complicated as you want it to be. And myself, I'm a fan of complexity, and so I became a monk. I like to get really good at meditation, but
Hmm.
you don't have to. Like that's the best part about it. You don't have to. You can achieve anything you want to achieve with meditation in the comfort of your own home, with consistency and a good technique, I think.
What do you mean about the controlling your own mind? There's the gradual practice of controlling your own mind. What
Yeah.
do you mean by that? What do you see your mind as opposed to what most people see?
Well, I see it as like a phone, really. And on a phone, take my wife's example. Don't tell her I said this, but on her phone, on any given day, you've got about, oh, I don't know, 20 to 30 apps
Hmm.
left there, just left there. Like, and she's like, "What's wrong with my phone? What's wrong with my computer?" And it's like, let's start by just like swiping away every single window you've went through the past 2 weeks because none of that stuff needs to be there anymore. And you do that on the computer, get rid of there's maybe 50 tabs open. There should be a max amount of tabs on every browser. Like at work, we're not allowed to have 10, like the apps, the software we use at work will not let us go past 10 tabs of clients. You can't have more than 10 tabs.
Is that intentional?
Yes, yes,
All
it's
right.
intentional. So you don't build up the system, bog it all down, and have all this private information floating around. So we should treat our mind like a phone. We should clear the apps away and clean it up and um, have a beautiful, open, and clear landscape for potentiality and spontaneity. Because when we get good at meditation, like when we get consistent and we kind of get past trauma, we get past like discomfort during sitting, and we get past the ability to breathe for more than 4 seconds, um, we start to have like this open field of nothing, and
Mm.
that's like when meditation actually begins. That's when we can actually start a real practice of meditation, and then what comes from that emptiness is like the bits of debris and specks that come off our spirit, and what like if you had a ray of sunlight right? There's different densities of the ray coming from pure sun to like just warmth that we feel on our skin. And we're getting closer to the sun in meditation. We're getting closer to that metaphorical sun, or that metaphorical like person inside of us that guides and controls this body and
Mm.
thoughts and everything. And that's all it is. And so we want to kind of swipe away at those thoughts and those experiences in our mind, like our phone, like the apps on our phone. And that's enough for like a few years, because that is very difficult. We've had those apps open for a long time, maybe
Mm.
20, 30 years, and it's time to swipe those closed. That doesn't happen overnight, but that's all we're really doing.
And how does that differ to cold showers, for example? Anyone who's listening to this who's taken a cold shower, they know that when they're exposed to the cold, there is nothing else that they end up thinking about except for the cold. Right? That's all they can think about because they're in freezing cold. Like it clears everything out, at least until you get back out and warm up again, and it'll come flooding back. Right?
Now,
How does that differ?
I'm a fan of cold showers. I'm a fan of techniques. I'm a fan of shock therapy. But at the end of the day, those prepare you to eventually sit down with yourself.
Mm.
And nothing will help you like paying attention to your own breathing, and using techniques to, once you actually sit down and alone with yourself. The shower is good, but it's not meditation. It's not real. And by real, I mean it's not permanent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not permanent. It's fleeting. It's like you needed something to kind of get to a better state of mind, but the mind is better than that. The mind is a much better adversary than you think. And a
Mm.
cold shower it's like that's not enough.
Yeah. Well, mainly probably because when your spouse is, maybe your spouse is the only one you can do this with. It's your spouse is doing something that's frustrating you. You aren't likely to jump into a cold
Yeah, what are you gonna
shower.
go? Yeah, you're gonna
Like
run,
so,
run from the problem.
yeah.
Yeah,
Run
exactly,
from your boss giving you a hard time about something. Yeah, or run from a
exactly.
client who's let you go. It's like no,
And
I'm just gonna go in the cold shower. I'll be back
and
in a
that's a
minute.
beautiful thing to say. That's perfect, because wherever you are, you're there, and you need to have a technique that goes with you. You need to have a technique that follows you everywhere, because you will always be where you are in a problem. And an outside technique and a device, maybe a meditation app or something, it's not going to be there. It's not going to be
Mm,
there when your kid's crying at 3 o'clock in the morning and you
mm,
have no idea what's going on and what you're doing. And you're going to be there though. Your mind's going to be there, and your breath is going to be there. And I mean, it all starts with that. It's the breathing is really our sense of permanence, and I think that's the first like ultimate technique.
But let's just say that someone listening to this is like, okay, great. I'm going to give meditation a try. I'm going to give it a shot. So they're listening to this. How can they, or how would you guide them to start on their meditation path?
I would recommend that they begin by writing. They actually take pen and paper and they journal their mind. I don't think they should sit down and just start practicing right away. I think that they should write if they've never written before. Okay, if you've never been a writer before, and especially a journaler of personal thoughts and feelings, you should begin writing. And you write down your past, write down traumatic events, write down things that you think about, write down things that you want, write down things that come up in your mind. And that should be really the first meditation, is when you have trouble writing, and you sit down and close your eyes and just look for something to write. And your mind will give you something, and write it down, right? And then you're a writer again. And then eventually sit down for 5 minutes, right? And just don't write, but breathe, and just see if you can sit down on the ground for a few minutes and just do nothing and think about, try to, not think, and try to go longer and longer and longer. And that's really the idea behind meditation, is just to not think.
Mm. Although there are a lot of challenges that people face as they go through that.
Yeah, that's really hard. That's number one. It's hard to sit down without moving.
Mm.
for a long time. I mean, 20 minutes and your hips freeze, and it's like I have to stand up or else, you know, my hip is moving me. Um, or you sit on your ankle a certain way and your leg falls asleep because you're sitting on a little nerve like that connects down to your ankle from the underneath side of your thigh. Um, and then the next challenge is beyond the physical. It's the mind, and then you have to get past everything the mind throws up at you, and then you have to be aware enough that the mind is even giving you thoughts to think about. You may go 20 minutes and not even realize that your mind was thinking the whole time.
Mm.
So there are different types of various meditations where you can even explore thoughts and extrapolate on thoughts. I have to go to the store. Maybe that flashes. Go to the store then in your mind. Get the groceries. Buy something. Check them out at the cashiers and then drive home and then continue the meditation again, all
Mm.
in your mind, and see if you can start to control the narrative in your head. That's that's sort of there's so many things with meditation over the years you discover. Um, but yeah, it ends up just being a practice of being able to sit still and do nothing and pay attention to your breathing.
So beyond that, though, I think I remember Jai sharing that you actually use various crafts to be able to improve your practice for meditation, but also just spiritual practices, right?
Sure,
And
sure.
that was what, like mountain biking, artisan bakery, craft beer, vocabulary, bodybuilding, all of that, right?
All that stuff is for meditation. No, no. That stuff was joie de vivre, a certain something, a zest for life.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Yeah, what eventually pulled me out of the monastery is life itself, and the conflict between the monk's desire to end life and my desire to keep life going in all forms. Essentially, after 12 years, I realized that to be a good monk meant to give up um, the living, to give up the desire of life and in all of its myriad, forms, which is really beautiful. You know, life, you should evolve with life. You should keep growing and keep doing different things and snowboard and mountain bike and go swimming in the ocean and fall in love, and you can do meditation all alongside that. But I had to leave because the monks didn't want me to do that. As was becoming more of an adult, becoming more of an individual, they wanted me to become more of a group mind and a herd mentality, and I just wasn't ready for that. And nor did I even believe that that was even a thing anymore, that that was necessary. Um, and if that is necessary, then I've got a problem with the way creation was set out and coded.
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, which I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with. That, like, a lot of people think about meditation or Buddhism or Hinduism or spirituality as something where you're giving up yourself, and that's like not yourself, but your experience of life that you're able to do alongside this self that you have, right? Your mind that you're able to use as a tool.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to go and think about nothing. I'm not going to sit down and think about nothing. That's terrible. And I guess what you're sharing is that the objective isn't actually to think about nothing. The objective is to ultimately experience more, right?
Yes, the reality is that we're trying to harness awareness so that we can control it and control ego. We're not trying to remove ego because we can't do that until we die, but we're trying to harness it all so it's under our control. We're holding the reins of our life, of our mind, of our ego, of our awareness, of our speech, of our nature, our movements. It's all under our conscious control. There's no subconscious driving anymore where all of a sudden we get to work and we realize we weren't even driving the whole time. It was just an autopilot type of thing. But we're in control of every left turn, every right turn, every gas pedal, every brake pedal. It's all ours to experience. And that lets us appreciate every time our daughter smiles, every time they laugh, every time they cry. Um, every time these little moments happen in life, we're there for it. That's one of the benefits and the consequences of becoming good at meditation. It goes beyond, it's not, we're not at that like enlightenment thing yet, and self-realization and all that. That's later, that's for other people. But for most people, the basics are just to not only enjoy life, but to just be there for it. That's the
Mm.
most important thing. And to not be so swayed and moved by emotion. Um, because I believe that we're alive to be alive. We're just alive to be there and experience it and witness it and to grow from challenges. And you can overcomplicate it and everything, and that's where I have a problem with heavy theological concepts that require and demand a certain precepts of a path. And it's like, man, if that's the case, then I don't want it. I don't want it. I want like what I've discovered to be beautiful and peaceful, and that should be my enlightenment and my moksha, as it's termed. Your liberation from birth. Um, if I've got to live in this place till I die and grow a beard and wear robes my whole life to like achieve something, then fuck you. You know what I mean?
I hear exactly what you mean. It's a like no, like I get it. A lot of people are like, well, why don't you just, if you believe in all this, then just go and be a monk, right? But experience of life is in life itself. Like I mean, I if you look at all of your problems, to anyone who's listening to this, and you're looking at your problems, and you've got a kid or a spouse, or you've got a job, or you've got a business, and you've got staff that you're responsible for, and you've got these responsibilities, and things kind of just aren't working the way they are, and you think, man, the only way I can overcome this is by uh, I just got to go and give it all up and become a monk, or I don't know, I've just got to go and do something completely different. I've got to go and like kind of get rid of all of this in order to be able to do it better. Then ultimately, you're just saying that the thing which is leading you to want to grow is the thing that you're trying to get rid of as well. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't make sense trying to do that. It's like, why would you want to handle your emotions about money better if it meant to you that you'd need to give up all of your money at the same time, and then you'd have no money to even have the emotion? It's you're saying to yourself, no, I can't handle these problems. I can't handle the issues.
Right.
It's just not for me. And it's really dangerous for someone to start thinking that. Like your path, as literally this whole spiel is inspired by what you just shared. Like your path in life is through pursuing the challenges, not through
Yes.
avoiding them and running away from them. Like what we said earlier, right? You could be in a disagreement with your spouse, and you can just choose, I need to have a cold shower, I've got to go and meditate to get rid of this, or I've just got to get away from it all. Like maybe there are times where it's valuable or a viable strategy to take yourself
Perhaps.
away so that you can calm yourself down and then
Yeah.
reapproach it. But you've got to be able to reapproach it, as opposed to what most people do is they'll run away from it and then they never come back to it. It's like,
Right.
not my problem anymore, not an issue.
Yeah. It's the obstacle because it becomes the way. I mean, and the crazy thing about it is some of the monks knew that, and they had to build a narrative to keep them there because they were essentially afraid of the world. And as I was leaving the monastery, some of the monks revealed that to me, and that hey man, don't go out there. It's not good out there. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, is that why you're a monk? Like, is that why you're doing this? So Jai and I think I can speak for Jai, like, and myself. We both came to the same conclusion where it was like, hey, I don't want to be any of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't identify with it anymore. I'm learning so much more, and I got to a point with some of Jordan Peterson's work in his 1999 book publication, Maps of Meaning: The Architecture of Belief. A fascinating read. It's one of the most complicated books I've ever read, and the concept at the very end is you will be essentially guided by the group mentality inside of ecclesiastical bodies of religious thought, essentially meaning that the old order of things will always say that you need to protect yourself against chaos in order to be safe. And that's exactly what we want the opposite of. We want to safely approach chaos so that we can become less of the group and less of order, but more of the individual, and empower ourselves to stand alone and become the hero of our own journey. It's the Joseph Campbell kind of hero's journey philosophy, and we are holding this sword, which is wisdom, and we are attacking the dragon of chaos and like keeping it at bay as it breathes fire onto our sword, and that's what we want in life. We're not hiding. We're actually just approaching the fire slowly and carefully.
Yeah, I love it. I'm reminded of something which really hit me by Josh Waitzkin in The Art of Learning. I think it's pretty much the only work that is put out to share his whole journey. As a youth, he was a chess prodigy, and then he was a Tai Chi push hands competition, like world record winner, whatever. And he shared that the reason that he was so different to others is he embodied the chaos. He'd make the chessboard chaotic, and then the other person, all of their prepared openings and strategies and all of it just didn't make sense anymore. And then he was able to find order through the chaos, while everyone else was just trying to contain the chaos so that it's all ordered and that they can avoid the chaos by preparing every move ahead. And you just never have to worry about that. You'd never have to have it as a concern. I love what you're sharing. I've loved what you shared in this conversation. Look, there's a lot which is here, and I feel like we've been going for a while, so I'm not even going to give the full in-depth. Yeah, there you go. I'm not even going to give the full in-depth summary of what we've looked at, but basically, overall, the core message which I've heard you share is that you don't need to get away from everything in order to be able to grow. In fact, that's the thing that's going to hinder your growth. And if you're looking to grow more and grow deeper, then you need to have more of what you referred to as a philosopher's mind. You need to be able to dig into the challenge which is facing you and start to have more gratitude while you're increasing your capacity. So increase the challenges that come your way. Find something which is more difficult. And maybe for the person listening, that's going to be a cold shower, or maybe it's going to be journaling their thoughts, or maybe it's sitting down for 20 minutes without moving, and just to focus on their breath and realize how crazy they are. Maybe a fun activity for someone is to realize that the normal route that they take with driving is feeling really quick. And what they've got to do is find a similar one, maybe just a few minutes longer or 5 minutes longer, and see how that 20-minute journey, just taking the 25-minute route, feels like it's 40 minutes or even longer, because there's so much more, which is new, right? You're curious, you're exploring. And that I'm going to leave it on that message that you shared of we're alive to be alive. We're alive to really dive into the experience of life and do the things as part of our spiritual journey, rather than just to get lost in the dogma and the teachings and the practice for the sake of practice. You're practicing for the sake of life and for what you're able to grow from it. That's really, really beautiful message. Is there anything else that you'd want to add off the back of the whole conversation we've had? Is there anything that you'd want to emphasize or add to what we've discussed?
I mean, you said it really well. You said it well. We did leave a pin and an idea over here.
We did.
And so if we unpin it,
Yes,
and
please.
go back to what the definition of success is, maybe it makes more sense now that I've come all this way in life to kind of come back to the most simple definition of success, which is to just do something you love, because that means that you're aware of it. You're aware of what's going on, and what can be more successful than awareness and being aware and being there for your own life. I mean, that's powerful. To want more than that, I think maybe overreaching, and to keep that keep the watch on that.
I like that. I mean, it's I'm gonna if I put that into context in your life, you're essentially saying you're a better spouse, a better father, a better parent, a better a better person to yourself as well, a better ex-monk, a better sometimes therapist, ex-therapist, a better person to your clients, a better person to your manager or employer. You're better at all of those things as a result of this greater sense of awareness that you have. Is that fair to say?
Yes, precisely.
Okay. I'm going to leave it on that note because that's a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation. Anything else to add?
No, I have nothing else.
Thank you for sharing your life and your journey, even though you're not the one who wants to change people.
Yeah, I decided a student asked me to write a book, put it all down on paper, and publish it so that I didn't have to enter into a world of self-promotion. But that's the only teaching I've left behind, I think, and other than students themselves. So if you wanna learn more about that, it's on Amazon. It's Everything Is Your Fault, and I'm you can know that I'm quietly living my life in Southern California with my family, and that's it.
Thank you for sharing, Raj. So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.